Our whole kitchen is organic for the last 15, 18 years.
Oh, wow.
About 15 years ago, she was sourcing the items in our kitchen from like 30 different places in India. It was largely trust-based. It wasn't certification-based.
When we talk about farming and investments that happen in this space, what we understand is that there is a lot of investment that happens on the input side, post-harvest, value-added side. But when you talk about investment in farming, there's very little that is happening.
Most funds are very short-term focused. If your total horizon of an investment is 5, 6, 7 years, farming doesn't happen like that. Okay, what can I sell to the farmer? What can I take from the farmer?
Yes.
Capital does not want to create, or the more traditional capital doesn't want to create new categories. They want to follow what consumers are asking. By the way, in our fifth fund, conscious consumer is an added vertical. What is my role as a consumer? I should be called as contributor at least. When I'm talking about my own health, my own environment, I'm not just a consumer, right? I'm a participant in that, right? So,
which I think we forget.
Thinking of these issues again less from a producer-consumer point of view, but thinking of these issues more as a community. You know what, I'm eating quinoa, right? You're getting a quinoa from Mexico, right? And you're saying that you're consuming organic food. The choice of a conscious consumer is also becoming a lot more difficult. I would want more behavior to drive capital rather than capital driving the behavior. By the way, this is one of those, again, winter season, and then the whole thing comes to the stub burning that happens in Punjab, Haryana and UP and all of that. That farmer who's burning that is not burning because he likes to burn that, and because he's the one who's breathing that air first before that air is going anywhere else. Climate, we've been talking about for such a long time. What happened in the last 10 years? I think even the politicians have figured out they don't have an option now. We will see the breaking of this cycle in our lifetimes. This is the water that we drink, the food that we're eating. There is no way that we can ignore it.
So who do you think is focusing today on the future of food?
Definitely not the investors.
The revolution in our food system is being quietly engineered not only in kitchens but in investment boardrooms. Today we're sitting down with a man who's not just investing money but is investing in a vision that could transform how India eats, produces and thinks about food. Imagine an investor who doesn't just see numbers but sees potential. A leader who looks at a small dairy farm and sees a blueprint for agricultural transformation. Someone who believes that every rupee invested can create a ripple effect of change. Meet Vishal Mehta, a corporate nomad turned impact investor who traded his corporate suit for a mission that's reshaping agricultural landscape. From the corridors of Nokia and Capital One to becoming the co-founder and managing director of Lok Capital, Vishal has a story that's anything but ordinary. Hi Vishal, welcome to Good Food Talks.
Thank you, Vachna. Thank you. Nice to be here.
So Good Food Talks is a series of conversations we're having with thought leaders who are also conscious consumers. The idea is to have more such conversations to talk about the source of food, where it's coming from, how are conscious consumers making those choices, how are they finding food different, from whether it's your fruits, your vegetables, or it could even be, your pastas, it could even be your coffee. So when we have more such conversations, we feel like we can drive more and more brands to do right by consumers.
Got it.
So that's the idea of these conversations. So thank you so much for coming and joining us.
Wonderful to be here. Sashi had spoken about this a while back. So I was also kind of watching and looking forward for the platform to get started. So I'm glad you're already there.
Thank you. So we know you're a foodie. We know you love sweets a lot. We know that there has been a journey for you as well, from maybe being on the junk eating side of the food story to now making a complete shift. We know that your kitchen has changed dramatically. Would you like to talk us through, what was the inflection point? What caused you to go through this entire change?
As you rightly know of, I was a foodie, but more on the junky side. But I think my wife, who's an environmentalist, for her and for us, some of those transformations happen more from the environment point of view. How do you look at farmer issues? How do you look at soil issues, water conservation issues. It was less to do with from a health point of view. And I guess gradually, as you grow older, in midlife, a lot of people start becoming more conscious about health also. So I think that got added as a secondary thing. And third, as you and I have also spoken in the past sometimes, once you have kids, that becomes almost like a third new factor.
Yeah.
How do you make some of those transformations? And those milestones actually somehow help you to make those transitions, right? Because those are real changes in your lives. So I would say over the last 20 years, these are the 2-3 changes or milestones that have transformed my junky foodie behavior to a healthy foodie behavior. I think so. Even though in my wife's terms, I'm still a
Oh, really?
junkie, given her standards and all that. Because I remember our whole kitchen is organic for the last 15, 18 years.
Oh, wow.
And organic as a consumer is still a fairly new thing in India. So I remember about 15 years ago, she was sourcing the items in our kitchen from like 30 different places in India. There wasn't one brand. And because of her work and because she was working with farmers, it was easy for us to then identify. So it was largely trust-based. It wasn't certification-based, right?
Oh, wow.
Now life is a little bit simpler because of brands that we are aware of, including Akshayakalpa, that there are more trusted brands where you can source more organically, and as well as you don't have to go to 30 different places.
Yeah.
But my son, for example, he's 16 years old. A lot of people in his circles, in our circles, call him an organic child. That's the brand that he carries.
Oh.
So he is grown up in this
Yes.
household. So for him, it just comes very naturally.
And
So-
does he have those conversations as well in terms of eating right?
So it's basically 2 versus 1 in our home. So I
Okay.
have no choice, basically. Yeah, he's much more health conscious than even I am, and again, more from the point of view of also what the sourcing is about,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, that's the household.
No, the you said that you get it from 30 different places. It can be daunting to do that, or do you think it's like if your heart is in the right place, it's okay? Like, can more and more consumers do that? Like,
It's very time consuming. It has to really become a priority, and I don't think most consumers, it's not very practical. So therefore I'm saying,
Yeah.
if the transition in the industry can be built around having more and more platforms or organizations that are able to provide that, then the better it is. Because I think both from the consumer awareness point of view as well as sourcing, you will have to make it convenient. Otherwise, it will remain a very small proportion.
yeah. One of the guests that we've had on the show is Miss Vani Murthy, who's also known as Worm Rani. She's a composting enthusiast, sustainability enthusiast, and she spoke about what she calls CSA, which is consumer supported agriculture. And she spoke about it on the show. And after that, I've tried to buy vegetables through the CSA. So basically, the trucks come to select locations in the city.
Correct.
And it's there for 15 minutes.
Correct.
And you need to go within that 15 minutes,
Correct.
pick it up and come back, right?
Correct.
So unfortunately for me, it's happening on, of
Right.
course, it's on Sundays. And Sundays, I'm usually out. I'm taking my kid somewhere and I'm not there. And I'm trying to figure it out. And it's very inconvenient,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I feel it is so worth it, like that effort of trying to, still go and get it from farmers. Like 15 years back, sure, it was inconvenient, but even today, I feel that, of course, like there are brands that are coming in and adding convenience, but when it comes to getting good food,
Sure.
convenience should possibly not be the filter that we apply.
Yeah, I think, but that's still a. I was thinking about it as you were saying, right? In the West, farmer markets are places where families go over the weekend,
Yes.
right? But I think in the Indian context, and especially if you want to make it a mass movement, we just cannot leave it for the slightly more privileged.
Yeah.
Right? For us, it still can be. For a common person, given their lifestyles, I think you'll have to make it. I'm saying convenient from those. If the ambition is to make it mass, and a lot of consumers follow it, one will have to do that. The advantage also is that, see, good food, organic food, sustainable food. The wonderful thing is, if somebody is truly talking about it, also very local.
Yes.
So if you add the local part, you've almost sorted out one of the biggest conveniences, right? So it's local. It's right there. You don't have to travel far distances. The more local it is, the better it is.
Yeah.
So, but still, I think I'm saying adapted more from the point of view of the common Indian consumer, right? The term I think you used initially also, you said conscious consumer.
Yes.
The conscious consumer in India is still a very evolving, and I'm being optimistic here, right? It's a very, very small category. And that category is also fits into a kind of certain income segment, right? So that's why I'm saying one will have to make a call. Are we okay to keep it limited to that space? But if you want to expand this, which is what the idea should be, right? Then we will still have to make it a little bit more convenient, right? Without compromising. You don't have to start therefore supplying in the same kind of packaging that your food comes in and all that. So it could still be organic. You can still go there and those trucks that you mentioned, you can. But the timing, the location, still should be made more convenient.
Yeah. Coming to investments, when we talk about farming and investments that happen in this space, what we understand is that there is a lot of investment that happens on the input side, which is seeds, pesticides, fertilizers. And then there's a lot of investment that is happening on the post-harvest side, right? Like once the harvest is done, how can you store? How can you increase shelf life? And of course, there's another huge set of investment happening on the value-added side. What do we do with these ingredients? What products can we create? What brands can we create, right? But when you talk about investment in farming, there's very little that is happening.
By this investment, you mean the more institutional kind of investing, the VC, the private equity kind of investing. You're absolutely right. There's hardly any. I think there's a fundamental mismatch. There's a very fundamental mismatch. Funds, most funds, and I'm generalizing, most funds are very short-term focused, right? That's how somehow we have adopted the fund models from the West again. And especially if you're trying to do something more impactful. So Lok, the fund that I run, for us, we were one of the first impact investing funds, as they're called now, that got started in India about 20 years ago. Even though for a starting point, I think it was okay, because when you're starting something new, to take something is working elsewhere is not a bad idea. But then you have to be very consciously improvising on it, innovating on it, right? And I think we fell kind of short there, right? So forget about the commercial mainstream funds, as I call, and I'll come to that. But even for impact investing funds, if your total horizon of an investment is 5, 6, 7 years, farming, doesn't happen like that. Right. So I think I would not blame it more on the investors. I think the model itself is kind of in some ways misfit. And therefore, if you really want to do more impactful things, and farming is one of those, very clearly, you'll have to think beyond the traditional fund model, right? And very few people have done that, if any. So you're absolutely right. Everybody is looking at it more from the point of view, what can I sell to the farmer, or what can I do once the farmer has done the farming bit, right? I mean, we were one of the first investors in Akshayakalpa, the first institutional investor. And we struggled initially when we were still kind of more small scale and all that to make the investors really understand, right? For me, it was easy because I was in touch with Akshayakalpa, for 5 years even before I made the investment, right? And we are fairly hands-on. For us, working on the field is almost as important as working in the offices on Excels.
Yeah.
But I know how most funds work. So we struggled, and both Sashi and I would have countless, debates and arguments also saying that, hey, you know what? How do I take an investor who's not even willing to go to the farm and see, right? So, but that is really the reality. You can't change it. I think the capital clearly needs to do some more innovation. I'm still hopeful. I mean, there are new themes in investing coming out. So now it's called blended finance. There you're talking about much more long term. So the time horizon is one big misfit. And I think also the commercial, or let's say the return expectation, is also a bit misfit, right? Some things which are as fundamental and as impactful as farming, if you want to start looking at it only from a commercial lens, it will not add up. Right? It might add up in one cycle. Otherwise, you'll end up doing the same thing. Okay, what can I sell to the farmer? What can I take from the farmer? Right? So somewhere the investor or the capital also needs to rationalize their expectation from something like farming. Right? It is not your J curves and whatever those in 5 year give me 5x. It just doesn't work like this, right? So I think I feel a lot of the more capital will flow in if we can manage these two aspects of the existing fund models, right? The time horizon as well as the return expectations.
It was very interesting. There is this case study that we keep referring to at Akshayakalpa, Tiptur, which is where the model farm is. Is also known as the sweet copra belt of India, and it has lakhs and lakhs of coconut trees. And when Akshayakalpa started, one of the things that we did was we measured to see what is the yield per tree per annum, right? And we knew that it was at around 55 nuts per tree per annum, right? Then we started looking for some data to say, did we know what it was a little while back, right? Luckily for us, there are two British surveys, one done in 1903 and one in 1905, which spoke about the yield in the same region. And it was 189 nuts per tree per annum. Right? So in a little over 100 years, the agricultural practices has taken away so much and not given back to the soil, not given back to, the trees that are there, that this is the situation. Now, cut to now, 15 years from then, and after putting back so much life into soil, we've reached a place where the yield per tree per annum is at 89. So we keep talking about this, that can we take it back to 185, right? Maybe. There's no taking back, I think, but there is a way to kind of go as we go forward. A lot of interventions can still do it, but it's possibly 50, 60, 70 years from now, right? So that's the kind of work that we're talking about because of the amount of damage that has been done as far as soil and soil ecosystem is concerned. And in today's fast-paced world, even having conversations like this with VCs, would it be met with interest or
Yeah, I mean the simple answer is I don't think so, and which is what we just spoke about also. I think again I'm not saying that VCs. I think the model itself is ill-suited for this, right? But if you were to just make some of those adjustments, right? For example, I do believe, and I again take an example of our investing ecosystem, which is called impact investing. We need to, rather than sticking to kind of 10-year funds, why can't we have 15-year funds, right? Why can't we have 20-year? All of a sudden, I'm not saying you even rationalize your expectations, but just give it more time, right? So I think unless we are fixing some of those problems, to expect that VCs will understand this is, maybe some will out of just interest, personal interest and all that, but otherwise it just won't fit in. It just doesn't. The other factor that will help kind of bridge these gaps so that capital also then understands this is in some ways what you're doing in this platform.
Yeah.
Right? Capital does not want to create, or the more traditional capital doesn't want to create new categories. Right? They want to follow what consumers are asking. Through these platforms, if the consumer awareness goes up and the consumers themselves start asking these questions, then yes, the capital will follow it. Right? But I think somebody has to make this kind of an investment as well.
Yeah.
Right? To me, this is a public good. This is a public investment. Right? Where people come and talk about the importance of good food and all that. And in some ways, again, some of the initiatives we did in Akshayakalpa, we will spend money on consumer education. Tell me the number of companies who do that.
Yeah.
Not from their own brand point of view. We will talk about our farmers and our work because we want to share that, because we want our consumers to come and engage with us. Why do we have camps in our farms and all that, right? So I think those are also but all of that needs money.
Yeah.
And if you're putting in money, then if you straight away expect that within 5 years I should get 5x, it just doesn't. So more patient and more rationalized return expectations, right? But these kind of things always assist that for sure.
Yeah, like even, from a marketing point of view, when people ask us, what do you, where are you spending? Farm visit is one large investment that we've made as Akshayakalpa, right? And
Correct.
I think it also has to come with some amount of long-term view,
Correct.
even not just from a farming and agriculture point of view, but even from consumer education point of view. And we are slowly starting to see that change happening.
Sure.
I think we've hosted around 40,000 consumers now in total, right, at all the Akshayakalpa farms. They come, they stay there for 2 days, they see, they understand, they ask us questions. But now when we go and meet consumers in the city, just for immersions and just from, marketing standpoint, they have started telling us back what they have heard.
Sure.
So there are conversations that are now starting to happen around, no, but it's important what the cow eats.
Correct.
Which is for a marketing person, it's the biggest thing, right? Like when you're drinking milk, why would you comment on what the cow is eating?
Correct.
Right? But consumers are talking, and because they've asked those questions, they've built that logic to say it's only if the cow is eating well, the milk is going to be healthy.
Correct.
And so I've now understood the source of
the connection.
So yeah, when consumer education done right, can definitely build and evolve categories.
Correct.
Right? Even organic as a category requires so much education. Forget milk.
Yeah.
I mean, milk is another this because now there's a cow in between.
Correct.
Right? But organic in general requires so much education. And
just notice, right? Use the term long term. We use it very casually.
Yeah.
From my investing standpoint, right, in that lingo, even 5 years is long term, but I would question that, right? It doesn't still work from a farming point of view, right? So I think more permanent, more long term sources of capital, really long term. I'm talking about 10-15 years at least. That is very, very critical. Right? So,
like for every farmer who wants to become an Akshayakalpa farmer, his journey is a 3-year journey.
Okay.
Right? Like his land has to go through a churn, all the pesticide fertilizer has to leave the soil.
That conversion.
Yes, he needs to learn how to take care of the cows differently, how to take care of his soil,
Correct.
how to create a closed loop, build his own farm pond, build trenches and bunds.
Correct.
I'll
give you one more example, and I do have the luxury also because Lok Capital, apart from our commercial impact funds, we also have a foundation capital, which is nothing but the profits of our fund, but we work with it very separately.
Right.
And there we are looking at what is called the impact first or deep impact kind of ventures, and not from a commercial lens, right? Not from a pure commercial lens. So the moment you will see some very deeply impactful ventures and companies and organizations, you will notice that the establishment of that is not less than 2-3 decades, right? But the investor typically comes in the last phase of it, and they're saying, no, what do you mean? It has scaled up, but they almost forget.
Yeah.
Right. I'll give there's Jaipur Rugs example. There
Yeah.
is Fab India. Everybody looks at Fab India in the last 10 years. The guy started this, 40 years ago,
Oh, wow.
right? Last Forest, one company that we've just funded, right? They think of the brand because it's a wild honey brand. They think of it as something that has come up in the last 10. Yes, the company came up for the last 10 years, but Keystone Foundation, which is the parent of Last Forest, has been working in Nilgiris for 30 years, right? So, there is absolutely clear proof these things will take much longer. And I think the capital providers need to adjust their thinking.
Yeah.
There is a certain kind of capital that is required early on. And yes, commercial, and I'm not saying therefore commercial capital has no space.
Yeah.
But I think we should be very clear what to expect from what pool of capital as well. I think there are finer points as to, so not every investor is, can be put in one category, and not every business therefore also could be looked at it from that lens.
Yeah. So do you think there is a future for farming and for food production in India?
What option do we have? We need to crack this, and we need to crack this at a much faster pace because, as you also said, the degradation has also happened in a very, very fast pace. So my sense is, yes, there is absolutely a future for this. I mean, see, in some ways, I would put the question something differently, right? When Lok was starting up, for us, our first biggest thing was, our thesis is they should be inclusive businesses in India, right? Businesses where when the privatization is happening, it's not just happening for a very small target group or an income group. It should be for everybody. So that's what the broader definition of inclusion is. And the question used to be, is inclusion, will it work? We don't have an option. Where is the option? If you build something where majority is left behind, it will fail.
Yeah.
It's a matter of time.
Yeah.
So for me, inclusive businesses in India is not a choice we have to make. We have just no other option. Similarly, if you're talking something as fundamental as food, right, which is to do with your farmer, which is, basis what study you read, between 50 and 70% of some households are related to farming in India.
Yeah.
You're talking about health, and we know what our health indicators as a country are.
Yeah.
Right. So there's an environment issue. There is a farming livelihood issue. There's a health issue. Right. Something as fundamental as that. What is the option? We have to fix it. I mean, so now it's a matter of how quickly we act upon it. But that choice, we don't have that choice, right? It's almost like how some of the countries lately in Europe has finally taken climate seriously. And I was there for my fundraising trips, and generally to US and all that. I don't think the debate is now about what happened, right? How come climate we've been talking about for such a long time? What happened in the last 10 years? I think even the politicians have figured out they don't have an option now, right? So it's no more my policy versus the other person's policy decision and all that. We just need to fix it. Now it's a matter of how much capital you can put behind it, and what innovation you can do, and what do you expect out of it. And therefore, a lot of public funding has started, right? There is no multilateral, there is no developmental financial institution, as they are known as, in the world, which is not devoting at least 50% of their money to climate, right? And to me, in that, sustainable agriculture just fits in beautifully, because it is not just about climate. Now it's about food also. Now it's about health also. Now it's about jobs also.
Yeah.
So in some ways, it is the secret formula. If I put my optimistic hat, which is rare for me, it is the most wonderful combination of problems you can solve by just solving this, right? You solved food problem, you solved your health problem, you solved your livelihood problem. Politicians should be, embracing this like anything, because, if a politician today can come out and say, you know what, I have jobs, I know the secret, they're going to win hands down. So I think there is a lot more to it. On top of it, now you add things like even creating a new category of consumers conscious consumers, right? The education part, the awareness part, to me, that's like a bonus, right? Because that conscious consumer, one doesn't become conscious consumer just for food,
Yeah.
right? Then you're changing so many, habits,
Yes.
or lifestyle, right? So to me, I'm just still keeping it as an added bonus if that happens, because I know how difficult that is. And consumer education, especially in this pronounced bombardment of brands and advertisements, and ultimately two guys controlling every marketing dollar that you spend, and this more than anybody else would be. It is very, very important to have more authentic um, um, information dissemination also, right? Therefore, I'm very honored to be here, because I think this is one of those things, Good Food Talks, where uh, very genuinely we're discussing what is good food and what it is take,
Yeah.
right? It's not there's one brand and therefore that brand is pushing the information, and
Yeah.
then you just go to Google and Insta and you're done.
Yeah.
So to me, this by the way, in our fifth fund which we're launching, so this is Lok 5, conscious consumer is an added vertical,
Wow.
right? Because we've figured out through some of our experiences with Akshayakalpa and few other brands, that this is something that can have much deeper, much long term, and much more diversified impact.
Yeah.
So we debated about it quite a bit, because a lot of people might not, our own investors will have to educate.
Yeah.
But I think this is the right thing to do.
You said it very rightly that when you become a conscious consumer, it's not just about eating right. You start making a lot of other changes. Recently, during one of the farm visits, we were at the farm, and this one consumer said, "Why are you not launching home cleaning detergents
Sure.
and which is safe?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "No, you should, because it's not there, and there are new brands that are there.
Yeah.
There are premiums that are there charging, but they're not being transparent enough about it."
Correct.
And so the value that Akshyakalpa has built now
Correct.
is of transparency. We will tell you exactly what is there in the product. So you see the connection she made of from food to home cleaning. There's really no connection, but that's her journey.
Correct.
And in that journey, she's looking and she's trying to find brands that can come and play a role and help her more than anything else.
Correct. In that small example, you bring a very important point, right? It's called the trust, right? Once you really build that trust, and every brand wants to build that trust, or is trying to build that trust, that will be in their manual and all of that. But if you are able to genuinely want to build that trust, once you have that trust, consumers are dying for it. They absolutely want it, because they're also figured out that clearly not everything that is coming on my Insta account or whatever is, they also know what is paid for, right? So who's paying for it.
Yeah.
So to me, yes, I have questioned a lot of the my sourcing platforms. Hey man, and why are you not giving milk as well? Why are you not giving me eggs as well, right? Because now that I've established that trust, I want to. But can I then go one more level as a conscious consumer, then help in that as well, right? Not just demand.
Yeah.
I think in some ways, consumer itself is a bit of a that gets a little bit more theoretical and philosophical, but why should I be seeing myself in such kind of you're talking something as fundamental as food as just a consumer, right? I should be called as contributor at least. And therefore I should think, what is my role as a consumer? Not just, hey, somebody is growing and it should not be just because, okay, therefore I'm paying a price for it. Right. So I think if we can get away from that thinking of, there's a good product and I'm paying a good price, so I'm okay,
entitled to get.
Exactly. Yeah. So but that's a different conversation.
You spoke a lot about your investment in Akshayakalpa. Do you see Lok investing in another Akshayakalpa sort of a firm in the future?
I've just told you, I've built a new category now, conscious consumer. And there's Super Bottoms, one more company that you're aware of. So I mean, these are the kind of companies that, and if you actually look back, and there are, as I gave you the last forest experience, even though that's from our foundation, there are some couple of coffee brands that we're looking at. In all of these companies, right, our starting point is the management, and especially the founders. They're all from the sourcing background.
Mm-hmm.
They all started this because they first understood the farming side, right? So, for example, in Super Bottoms, it's basically a mother who was figuring out a solution for her stage in that life. So they're all people who have come from it from okay, I'm facing a problem, I need to solve for it, right? So no, absolutely, we are very, very bullish about it. Not just again from a commercial point of view, right? I think some of this will do well. Akshayakalpa for us has done very well, but some might not, and that's the investing game. But more importantly, is this the right thing to do as an impact investor? Absolutely yes. So we have a new category. So for sure. Yeah.
When it comes to organic, again, I think there is a spectrum in terms of the number of the companies that are there in the organic space.
Sure.
Akshayakalpa is not in the sourcing game. Akshayakalpa is in the growing game, right?
Correct.
We say that, so for us, it's not about you grow as a farmer, I will take it, I will package it, I'll make it a brand and sell it, right? In fact, our strength so far has really been everything that we're doing in the back end with the farmers, right? And because we're doing that, there's so much we know, and the confidence with which we can say that our product is, top notch, right? Like I can close my eyes, and even as a mother, I can close my eyes and give this milk to my son because I know the rigor that has gone behind by not being a company that trades, by being a company that produces, that works on the field, in the soil, right? But of course, there are companies, which are in the trading game. So when you are, looking at these companies, what are some of the red flags, for you?
I think as a purist, I would want to have that approach where the sourcing is the key, or the growing and the farming is the key. But I want to be practical also, because I'm, if the intention is also to increase the category or to make it bigger and better from every perspective, I think even from a distribution point of view, if you do it right, there is strong value. Because I have known of organizations who might not be directly into the farming side, but their connection with the farmer is very honest and very deep, right? And it's a very distributed model also, right? See, because from a scaling point of view, now again, I want to step back. I don't want to think of scale from what a VC thinks of a scale, right? For me, scale, even, so we talk about this a lot in the context of Last Forest, right? Last Forest was able to do this in certain tribal areas in Nilgiris. There are folks who are coming and learning from that and doing this in Udaipur in Rajasthan. No connection, right? They are building their own brand. To me, that is scale, right? Unless, not from a commercial VC point of view. To me, that replication is absolutely scaling up, right? So if we change the lens of how you look at scale, right, I think it's still very much possible. As I said, I've come across several institutions, and to me, actually, the key, Vaishnav, lies in literally the more fuzzy philosophical is, what is the intentionality, right? What are people really trying to do? Again, I'll take one example. There's a company called BioBasics in Coimbatore, right? I know the founders very well. It's a couple. They are not into directly farming. I mean, they know farming and they've done, but they're not. But I know that if they are dealing with the farmers, there will be a certain, code behind it, and fairly ethical code behind this. So I will still trust them. And I think they're still doing a very, very important job of giving the market access to that farmer. There's a fair dealing there, both on the time of the transparency as well as the value that is being transferred to the producer. So yes, I want to be practical. I think I am okay with that. To me, the crux of this lies in who am I dealing with and what is the motivation behind it, which is the job of an investor in no matter what you do.
Yeah.
So I need to figure out if I'm giving money to any entity or any individual, I need to be able to understand. So I think this is still possible. I mean, Akshayakalpa is very unique, and I keep telling, I've had a lot of debates with Sashi. We cannot imagine, and this kind of model for us to replicate will not be that easy, right? And therefore, what Akshayakalpa is doing is incredible, right? Because you're managing both sides fairly well, right? For me, as long as you're managing one of these things, the growing part and the distribution part well, and as long as you're doing with the right set of motivations and checks and balances, it's absolutely fine.
So who do you think is focusing today on the future of food?
Definitely not the investors. No, it's this. To me, these organizations, some of them, we named, right?
Yeah.
These are folks who've been concerned about this not just now, because as I said, some of their work started many years ago, decades ago, when as a common consumer we didn't even think that we're in a crisis. My sense is maybe 40-50% of the consumers still don't think we have any crisis about this. So I think the same people who are thinking of,
so the ones who are growing are the ones who are thinking about
the ones who are growing, they are clearly the ones. I think capital is gradually getting aligned. As I said, this whole transition in the impact investing, as well as within that also now blended finance, which is saying, okay, you know what, maybe I need to look at my returns a little bit differently. That's a good evolution from a capital. And ultimately, if you get the human capital and the financial capital kind of both aligned, that's where I think the solutions will emerge. I'm not too concerned, and maybe that's my mindset also. I'm not a big believer or thinker in, technology will come and solve it. I think we have enough technology already to solve for some of these issues. What we need is, more people thinking and questioning this, and more capital, therefore, supporting those thinkers and doers, right? I think if we do that, the technological innovations will, technology will follow in any case. And we have enough that can solve for it for now. But yeah.
So as consumers, sometimes I think we think that what can I do? What big change can I bring about, right? But what you're saying is that if this base of conscious consumers grows, and it is growing, more and more people are going to focus on this cohort, and when that focus shifts to them, even the funds will also shift in that direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I mean, the more logical sequence should be, yes, consumers asking for it, because I'm always worried when capital is driving something.
Yeah.
Because capital by nature, again, I'm talking about mainstream capital, is very short-term in focus, short-term in kind of thinking, right? I would want more behavior to drive capital rather than capital driving the behavior. But, we live in a capitalistic society largely. So, and there's very important need for that. So, but to me, the more organic, the more natural one would be the consumers asking. Therefore, as you, kind of breaking it down, consumers can ask a lot of right questions. Just the things they're, their milk wala, their sabji wala, to their grocery shop, to the brands that they buy from. Okay, yes, whole truth says whatever, but what is really behind this, right? Is there really, what kind of sugar goes into this? Just the content on the packaging, right? I told you about my son, and his level is even more advanced. Literally, when he was 7 or 8, whatever, before he goes and picks up anything, he still looks at the content. I've never made any conscious. But see, that's if you can have more and more of that, right? Because only if you read, you will question. And it was just 2 days back, and he said, there's no way, they have not mentioned any sugar here, and there's no way that you can have had, this kind of sweetness without any added sugar. So again, I think consumers do have a role. absolutely as there's just pure consumers. But I think I have a fundamental problem with the term itself. These are people, and consumer. When I'm talking about my own health, my own environment, I'm not just a consumer, right? I'm a participant in that, right? So,
which I think we forget.
Which is, is difficult to remember. I agree. So,
no, so we also have a program now where we are going to schools and we're teaching children how to grow their own food.
Brilliant.
And in that, we have a workshop on label reading. Where we're teaching children how to turn the pack around, read what is in the food that you're eating, and it's bringing about phenomenal conversations.
Correct.
When we go and meet, we recently finished one in Hyderabad. Glendale International has, just completed theirs, and the way the kids are talking to us is so different.
Yeah.
They're looking at food so differently all of a sudden.
Correct.
And imagine now these kids growing up and becoming the conscious consumers.
Absolutely.
Money
Absolutely.
going from their pocket, and
Correct.
what are they going to put their money on?
Correct. Correct. No, I mean, as we've figured out, right, not just about this kind of a change, but a lot of other social change. We have to focus on how do we bring it and make it part of the education system, right? Because these are the future everything.
Yeah.
Whether you call it consumers or participants or citizens or whatever. So to me, if one can integrate some of these things with the educational content, whether it's directly with the colleges and all that, or schools, that's again one very big public service you're doing, because that's where some of the more fundamental long-term change will happen.
Yeah. Who do you think is the biggest stakeholder when it comes to deciding what this country should grow?
Why?
Is it the venture capitalist? Is it the organization that is?
Please keep investors out. They're the most useless category. Sorry.
Is it the consumer? Is it the farmer? Or is it someone else? Who's deciding what this country should grow?
Who should decide, or who is currently deciding?
Yeah, who is deciding and who should be deciding, what we should grow?
So I think who should be deciding is definitely the consumer and the farmer together. Right? I mean, it's that what should be.
Yeah.
It's far from reality.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, by the way, this is one of those, again, winter seasons. Everybody is talking about the pollutions in our national capital again, and it's become an annual phenomenon and all that. And then the whole thing comes to the stub burning that happens in Punjab, Haryana, and UP and all of that. And people just make simple, ignore simple observations, right? That farmer who's burning that is not burning because he likes to burn that, and because he's the one who's breathing that air first before that air is going anywhere else. Just go one more level, right? There is a policy that is dictating that certain crops will have an MSP, certain crops will not have an MSP. Right? It's as simple as that, right? So it's the political mafia or the policy that is actually dictating what the farmer is growing right now, or what they should grow, because for them, survival and I'm talking about the 80% of the small farmers rather than the large farmers and all that. So I think unfortunately it's the policy and the politics that is deciding right now. But and then one can say, in a democratic system, public decides the policy as well. In an ideal world, yes, but again, that's a separate conversation. So your question is, who should be deciding? It's definitely the consumers. Ultimately, the participants, the citizens should be deciding, along with the farmers. That's those are the two main participants here. Yeah.
And now, because that is not happening, a lot of food is disappearing from from the environment, isn't it? Like a lot of gourds that we used to eat before. Samir was there in the previous, who was talking about it. That the minute you make it monocropping, you say this district is going to produce this particular crop. That's it. You've lost the 100 other things that same land would have grown.
Correct. And there's so many examples of it, right? Because the sustainability part is not just from the environment. What it also means is that if you do it right, very small regional places can be self-sustaining. Yeah. You don't need, all those fancy exotic, grains or fruits and vegetables. What grows, you eat. I mean, that's the basis of. So I think that's where we are saying, consumers also will have to then adapt to those choices as well, and which has been the most difficult for me, because from a junky foodie to a healthy foodie, I have to therefore realize that this is the season of this vegetable, so I have to make do with whatever I can do with this vegetable. I can't be importing stuff from outside or getting it from other places and all that. So I think those transformations are also equally important.
But when you make those transformations with this exact thought that you spoke about, even that transformation can be beautiful, isn't it? Like, for you to put yourself through that journey where you're thinking that I'm eating this because this is what is grown today, and there's beauty in that.
Yeah, you're making it sound nice, but believe me, there are also things I have to give up there for. But yes, I mean,
it's the junkie in you speaking.
Yeah, correct. But yes, there is, and I do cook. I cook dinners at least 4 or 5 times a week.
Wow.
So I've kind of learned to make some of those adjustments for sure. Yeah.
What appeals most to you about farming stories that you hear?
I think there is something about physical labor, right? That for me just becomes something that I'm able to really relate to, and it's just very powerful for me, right? To me, that part of farming, right? At the same time, mixing that with understanding of what nature has given us, right? So it is your contribution is the physical part, and you're kind of mixing it with what do I do with the soil and water and everything and the seeds and everything, right? To me, it's a magical combination. I can't express more of that in words. To me, that is really the farming part, right? And if I'm still capable of making changes in my life, believe me, my first dream I have is to do more farming. That's unquestionable for me. But within farming, since you asked, and you forced me to think, these are the two things that really stand out.
And when you look at these, the stories, and when you start getting a little technical about it, soil organic carbon is a great indicator of life in soil. And right now there's a lot of problem as far as SOC is concerned across the globe. And also in India, right? There's a Deccan Herald article which says that in India the SOC is at 0.4%, which means we're going towards desertification, as a nation. And it's so ironic that in a farming nation like India, the SOC is so low, right? So does that also kind of play a role in some of these decisions that you take when you work with agricultural or farming related?
No, for sure. I mean, in some ways, the whole idea of starting Lok Capital or an impact fund was so that you are not just putting capital; you're putting capital to things where it is needed, right? And it has to be things that are needed in the Indian context. In the Indian context, right now, if you're not solving for as basic issues as soil, nutrition issues, then we're missing the whole point. So for us, yes, it is very, very important. But are we large enough to make that kind of difference? I question that. I'm optimistic that yes, this can grow and this is going in the right direction. But for us, yes, this is central to our thinking and decision making.
So money can grow good food.
Money is, you need resources, right? Ultimately, you need, unless we're talking about working in a society which works on different principles, and there are models of that. I do spend, as you know, a lot of my time in Pondicherry and Auroville. To me, even though very small, a very successful example of yes, there is alternatives, right? But in the context of what we are talking about, they grow a lot of things that they eat, right? They just kind of grow it themselves. The kind of forest that exists in Auroville is just unthinkable, and especially when you think, and I've seen some of those documentaries and photographs and all that, because I've spent now 8, 9, 10 years there, where that whole thing used to be a completely, there was actually just one single tree, literally just one single tree in that whole area of red sand, right? the red sand still exists,
Yeah.
but it is actually one of the best forests that it is actually one of the best afforestation examples in the whole world, right? So yes, but that's a much more radical approach. I
Yeah.
wish we can do more of that,
Yeah.
because I do believe, again, apart from this, the biggest idea is thinking of these issues again less from a producer consumer point of view, but thinking of these issues more as a community, right? To me, a lot of problems, right, that exist today are because we've forgotten that ultimately it's a community. And if you can bring back that community living together, you will not have to think about a producer and consumer.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And to me, Auroville, so those are slightly more radical, but Auroville is an example of that. And I know a few other communities, and which exist in the West also, by the way.
Yeah.
To me, those are also real answers. But even in our more day-to-day and mainstream living, yes, capital can absolutely, capital should, forget about can, because I keep saying, we do not have an option. We will see the breaking of this cycle in our life, in our lifetimes, right? Definitely in your lifetime, because you're younger than I am. But I'm very sure in my lifetime also. This is the water that we drink, the food that we're eating. There is no way that we can ignore it. The impacts of it are already there if you talk to the more concerned individuals. But to me, you will see it at a much bigger scale very soon. So where is the option, right? It's the choice we have to make is, do we wait for that and then act, or should we start acting now?
We know you're a travel enthusiast. We know your trips are nomadic in nature. Have you seen food change over the years on these trips that you do?
Oh wow, wonderful. But since you mentioned that, I have to tell you this story. So my son, when he was in 8th or 9th, when he was 8 or 9 years old, he was getting a summer break. He was studying the French school in Pondicherry, and he had this summer break, and he says, "Guys, can we actually go to a vacation this time where we stay in a hotel?"
Yeah, I remember you telling me this.
Because my friends come and say they went to this place and all that, and what can I say? I went to this jungle and we pitched a tent here, and then we went to that, So, anyway, so yes, I think lately I've taken up to cycling for the last 7-8 years. I go to Ladakh almost every year for cycling, and in some of those most pristine places, and mountains is part of my life. I go to mountains like 5 times a year. Right? So, but even if we talk about Ladakh as something, the amount of packaged and junk food, you just can't miss it, right? So to get your authentic food, one has to make that extra effort. What is more visible, what is more easily available, is obviously the more packaged and the junk food, even in kind of those kind of places, right? So yes, so that's number one. Number two, for me, when I'm traveling to those places, it would have been much easier 20 years ago just to go to any place, anybody's home or any restaurant, and not have any doubts about what am I eating, right? Now I have to think hard, right? Because number one, the amount of choices that are available there, clearly they're not grown there. Clearly, to transport them to these kind of places, what kind of preservatives, what kind of logistics they'll be using. So I think that trust factor and what is more readily available, obviously. So it's still, what still works is, you pack your food and you cook your food. But sometimes in some of those more tiring and long trips, it's not possible.
Yeah.
So you have to make do with what is there. But yes, it has changed
drastically, I'm sure. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, packaged food has completely changed the whole the way about we think about food. I mean, the fresh part, and I can understand if one has to do it out of a necessity and all that. But give me a choice. I would always want to eat what the locals eat, and I always want to drink what the locals drink.
Yeah. I have a friend who stays in Ladakh. She's been there now for about 3.5, 4 years. And she says you get everything in Ladakh.
Yeah.
You know, you name it. You get your dosas, you get
Correct.
idlis,
Yeah.
you get rotis,
Yes.
you get, you know, so,
Yeah.
but like earlier, people would only cook what was readily available in their.
Correct.
So that means imagine the amount of effort that is going into transporting all of this food to
Exactly.
a tiny little place like Ladakh,
Exactly.
and the stress that is putting on the system. Oh my God.
Of course. I mean, it's one of those things, I mean, you go to a friend and say, you know what, I'm eating quinoa, right? You're getting a quinoa from Mexico, right? And you're saying that, you're consuming organic food. I think the whole definition and understanding of what is organic. So I think that the local part somehow kind of gets missed out.
Yeah.
And it's again the same factor that you mentioned. It's also the thinking of the entitlement, right? That because I can pay for it, I can source it, and I can be healthy, and I'm supporting the movement. But you're not counting the carbon footprint of the food that had to be transported here for sure.
Like 2,000 kilometers minimum.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
I mean, even within India, I think it is still.
Yeah. And even when you're in those places, in fact, you have to make so much effort, so much extra effort to really eat the local authentic food, right? Because that also has become more of a marketing gimmick, right? Local food, local Ladakhi food. But you know that, if you're talking to really the people out there, this is not local Ladakhi food. So the choice of a conscious consumer is also becoming a lot more difficult, right? It's not easy, right? So, but it's all. I think ultimately it depends on what's the extra mile that you're willing to go.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, we're adding a small segment called This or That. I'm going to ask you two things, and you tell me what you would pick.
So I can only pick one.
Yeah.
Okay. And I can ignore both also, or I can say.
Yeah, you can. Okay. And you can make a personal choice, which is only your choice.
Okay.
And not your family's choice.
Okay.
Like the one that you've spoken about.
Thank you for that freedom.
Conscious eater or dominated by cravings?
Conscious eater. Now.
Okay. Driven by taste or driven by mind?
Taste has to be. Yeah.
Eat in or eat out?
Oh, eat in for sure.
Order in or cook at home?
Oh, absolutely cook at home.
Locally sourced ingredients or exotic?
No, has to be local. I mean, but you're talking to a transformed, who's been transformed by a lot of family pressure also.
Organic or conventional?
Of course, organic.
I'd rather know my farmer or know my brand?
I think farmer is easier, but it just becomes impractical. So even if I know the brand, then I'm putting a lot of weightage on that my brand knows the farmer at least. Right?
Yeah.
So for me, that connection is very important. Otherwise, it just becomes very...
So what would you pick? Know my farmer or know my brand?
Know my brand is more practical now.
Source story or brand story?
Oh, of course, source story.
Okay. We also have this initiative, which is a public awareness initiative called What's Your Switch? Where basically we are talking to people, consumers, and asking about that one switch that you made. Why did you make that switch? Like, what did you figure was wrong or broken about something that you were consuming? What caused you to make that shift? And today, what are you consuming?
There's so many. So basically, what specific changes you made?
So you were, like, for example, I used to buy pepper powder. I figured that spices in India is one of the most adulterated categories. And so I started buying organic pepper, which I grind at home, and I make powder out of it, and that's what I use.
Got it.
So I've removed a little bit of, conflict that can exist in my mind, that is this really pure? Is it really pepper? Is this pepper powder? So that's the choice. That's the switch that I have made. So what's your switch?
I would say, there have been, far too many in that way. But the one that has come more from myself was happened when I was aware of Akshayakalpa. So for me, dairy has absolutely, either I get that milk that I can authenticate, otherwise I just don't consume it. So for me, that has been the most powerful, and I'm so much more skeptical about, and especially in your journeys, right? You just can't, and then the best thing there is just to avoid it. So dairy, and thanks to Sashi and Akshayakalpa, has been that switch for me.
Great. This has been very, very insightful, Vishal. Thank you so much for coming and joining us.
No, thank you so much, and really all the best for this wonderful work that you're doing in good food.
Thank you.
Thanks.